Hi, Dennis here. Welcome to Sober Talk. I'm Dennis, and I've lived an experience as an alcoholic. If you or anyone you know is struggling with alcohol, please call Alcoholics Anonymous on 1300 222222 or check out the website on aa.org.au. And the preamble of Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other that may solve their common problems and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for a membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. A not allied with any sect, denomination, politics or organisation, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses or opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. I am responsible when anybody anywhere reaches out for help. I want the hand of AA always to be there, and for that I am responsible. And our guest speaker today is Karina.
Thank you. I'll start the way I start in most meetings. My name's Karina and I'm an alcoholic. And today I recognise that my disease of alcoholism was there forever. I can remember as a child feeling uncomfortable and not belonging, always trying my hardest to fit in, to be like the rest of the world, and somehow I just failed. I had no words as a child, to express that feeling or that emotion, that anxiety of just trying to be. It was really a mind-blowing experience. I recognise that today, but as a child I didn't recognise it. And who do you tell, You don't go to your mum or your friends and say, look, I just don't belong. It was a long time after I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I saw a T-shirt that said, I'm a Martian just visiting this planet. And I thought, that's it. That's how I felt. I felt like a Martian just visiting this planet, always struggling. I believed that I'd been adopted. That wasn't true. I believed all sorts of things. I just did not fit. I was a square peg trying to squeeze into a round hole. And I come from an ethnic background, so alcohol was never forbidden to us. But I remember the first time the miracle of alcohol happened to me, and I was aged around about 16, I think, and I poured that drink inside of myself and it changed the way I felt. It was like I had this magic potion that said, look out, world, here I come. And I did. I came in a big way, and today I firmly believe in what is one of our sayings in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it goes like this. It says that, normal people go to a party to get drunk. Alcoholics get drunk to go to a party. I got drunk to go to life. It was the only way I could manage to live like other people lived. It enabled me to get the fellas. It enabled me eventually to get jobs. It enabled me to do some studying. It enabled me to have children. And I've got to say right up front, I wasn't a daily drunk immediately. I was a drunk that drank when life was tough. And life was tough a lot of the time. And I drank for around about 20 years. I drank for 20 years to go to life. That's pretty amazing when I think about it. And I know today that alcohol actually enabled me to live long enough in this world as a Martian till I reached Alcoholics Anonymous. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous for one reason and one reason only. Alcohol had stopped working. The very thing that used to help me get through life turned on me. You know, towards the end of my drinking, it had taken away everything. I was laying on a bed alone. Nobody wanted me. The family was desperate. They wanted nothing to do with me anymore. They had tried everything. You know, sometimes I wish that I had been one of those drunks that just drinks in the lounge room, but I wasn't. I would have a drink and I would have a good idea and I would go out and go through with that good idea. And everybody had had enough of me. I was like almost like an exploding bomb. You know, I'd have a drink and then there was no way of even thinking about what the outfall of this drinking would be. And the amazing part about that was I didn't care. I needed that alcohol to make me feel okay about being in the world that I was living in. And in the end, that alcohol drove me into laying in bed and crying in a depression. Nobody wanted me. Nobody wanted me. You know, when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous in the end, I came in with a history at that point that, you know, was probably not very envious to anybody. I had 3 children, and at that point I had actually thrown 2 of my children out of my house because they were cutting into my alcohol supply. You know, I came into Alcoholics Anonymous and I had my current ex-lover had a court order out against me so I wouldn't darken his doorstep. You know, I had been picked up by the police and had spent nights in the lockup. And those lockups are really good, you know. They lock you up for drunk and disorderly or just for being drunk, and they let you out at 4 o'clock in the morning. And it was not a pleasant experience. You know, I was facing eviction from the place that I was living in, and I was also facing losing my employment at that time. So, you know, but all of this didn't really seem to matter that much. What mattered to me and what had brought me into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous was that alcohol had stopped working. I poured that stuff into myself and it didn't change the way I felt, which was miserable, lost and lonely, a bigger Martian than ever before. I came into AA, I had no expectations. I had no real understanding of even why I was there, really. Somebody had recommended that I go, and so I went. And I went and I sat. I think my brain must have been awfully scrambled at the time because I sat in those rooms and didn't understand anything. I could hear what these people were saying, but it didn't make any sense. And in later years, I tried to think, why did I go back? Because they asked me to come back. Why? What was it that made me come back? And, of course, when I look on it today, I realise that what made me come back was that for the first time ever, a mob welcomed me. You know, they said, you're doing fine, just come back, just come back. I didn't feel like I belonged in there in the beginning, but they wanted me back and they were kind to me. And I realise now that for the first time ever in my life, I felt, I'm quite sure that in my early life lots of people wanted me too, but for the first time in my life in Alcoholics Anonymous, I felt as though somebody wanted me. And I was one of the lucky ones. I sat in those rooms long enough to become what we call teachable, I suppose. I sat in those rooms long enough to realise that there was something to be done here. I sat in those rooms long enough to realise that there was a program for living. And in the beginning it made no sense. We have a 12-step program rather for alcohol that we practice in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it made no sense. And those kind people who buffeted me and loved me and encouraged me just said, doesn't matter if it doesn't make any sense, just do it. And so I just did something that made absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. And in a little while I began to realise that things were changing for me. And what was primarily changing was that my thinking was altering. You know, I was beginning to see things in a different way, in a way that I hadn't perceived before. And today I know, and I speak only for myself, I know that the disease of alcoholism is a disease of perception. It makes me see the world in a way that may not be quite as accurate as it actually is. And so I became a devoted Alcoholics Anonymous member, and I attended meetings and I did what they asked. I went through the program, I got myself a sponsor, and all that I was told to do was just keep coming back and just do what we do. And I kept coming back and I did what they did. And it's only when I look back in hindsight that I can see that my life began to alter. Not because I was making any changes, I wasn't. You know, I wasn't going out there fixing things with the kids or making it up with my ex-lover. I wasn't doing any of those things. But what was happening for me was that things were beginning to alter. One of the first things that happened was the people that were going to evict me from where I lived forgot to evict me. I can't explain that. I don't know how that happened. I just know that the eviction notice never came. And the very next thing that happened was I was at work one day. Obviously, I'd still been going regularly. And I bumped into the boss in the passageway one morning, and she said to me, "I'm not sure what it is that you're doing, but whatever it is, keep it up." And even then, the penny didn't click that they weren't going to let me go, you know. And eventually a couple of my children began to speak to me again, and that ex-lover of mine withdrew the court order against me, and we began to become friendly again. And my life began to alter, and not because I was there actively altering my life, and I recognise that today what was happening for me was that my perception was altering. The way I was thinking about the world and its people was changing. Because when I was a Martian trying very hard to be an earthling, you know, I firmly believed that it was the world and its people that was the fault for the way I felt. I believed that if my bosses had been nicer, I believed if my parents had been more loving, I believed if my kids had been nicer, you know, I would have had a better chance in life. I blamed the world for the way I felt. But today I recognise that the way I felt was due to a disease that we call the disease of alcoholism, and it is a disease of perception. Now, I've been coming to AA now for quite some time. I have a few years up in the fellowship. And sometimes, you know, people will say to me, my friends, I have friends these days, I want you to know. Sometimes my friends will say to me, well, they still keep going back. You know, you're not drinking, everything's fine. But the reason I keep going back is because I know that I suffer from this disease of perception. And if I don't continue to go to a place where my disease is reaffirmed to me, and that's in meetings, if I don't continue to go back to meetings where I can hear how I can live with my disease and how I can change it, change my thinking, you know, I will forget. If I stay away from meetings for too long, I forget. I forget what a disaster my drinking was. I forget what a disaster my life was. In fact, I begin to think that life is a disaster. So I continue to go to Alcoholics Anonymous because of my disease of perception. I guess for me, the best way of explaining it is, you know, when you have problems, I speak only for myself, you know, when I have problems and I go to, let's say, my best friend or to a counsellor or to the church or to a psychologist, and I have no problem with any of these people, their response to me is, tell me your troubles and we'll try to fix it. But in Alcoholics Anonymous, it works in direct opposition to that. In Alcoholics Anonymous, they say to me, we don't really care too much about your problems, but come to us and we will fix your behaviour and your thinking. And that's what happened to me. The first behaviour that was altered for me was don't pick up the first drink no matter what. And I adhered to that. I didn't pick up the first drink no matter what. And eventually I was shown how to be friendly towards people. I was never friendly towards people. I'm a Martian. You're not friendly to Earthlings. I was shown how to put my hand out. I was shown how to shut my mouth and listen to somebody else for a change instead of babbling on about myself all the time. What AA and the program has done for me is that it has taught me to live in a world that baffled me. It has taught me to have a life that I couldn't achieve in a world that baffled me. Today, I go to AA for one thing and one thing only, because it helps me to live in a life and to do things that other people do. The best example of that is, driving yesterday to the shopping centre, there was a police car right behind me, and my heart rate never changed because I was an honorary citizen obeying the law. Not that I'm saying I don't speed occasionally, I do. But on that day, yesterday, nothing happened, because I was an earthling obeying your earthling speed limit and doing okay in the world. And I love that. I guess in essence, if I'm to sum it up, Alcoholics Anonymous and the program and the people in it do for me today what alcohol used to do for me. It enables me to walk out in the streets and to be a citizen, to be an earthling just like everybody else. And for that, I am truly grateful and will continue to come back. Thank you.
You said earlier that one of your problems with your drinking was that you would have these good ideas and act upon them. What did you mean by that?
Well, I'd be sitting at home miserable, lonely, lost and miserable, and I would have a few drinks and I would know that Prince Charming was out there somewhere, and I went out to find him. No holds barred.
And you were saying now that you have a different way of thinking, that it's a philosophy. Is it because the voice in your own head was being cruel, being harsh on you? Have you learnt to be gentler?
That's a bit of a tough one. I find that my disease of alcoholism always tells me to be tough on myself. I will be the first person that I will find fault with today as a sober person. And I guess that's why the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous is so important, because I can walk into a meeting or even meet with a friend for a cup of coffee and a fellow AA member, and I can say, today I really feel whatever it is I feel, short, fat, ugly, stupid, inept, unloved, and we can talk about that and see how that's not actually quite true. So my disease of perception continues, but I have a foil for it today, and I have an intricate belief that, my disease of perception is exactly that. It is a disease, not to be believed. We have another little saying in Alcoholics Anonymous that says, my feelings are not facts. And I know that that's probably true for the general population as well. But I would have to say that my friends who are in Alcoholics Anonymous and we share a commonality. We are super sensitive. you know, and it's that super sensitivity that needs to be overcome a lot of the time, I suppose, for want of a better word.
Have you ever fallen off the wagon?
Have I ever drunk since I came in?
Yeah.
Yes, I came in, and 2 years after I came in, I picked up a drink for one night and one night only. And I came back, and after that, I have not had a drink.
What did you feel about yourself after that point?
After I picked up that one drink, or that night of drinking, well, what happened for me that night of drinking was actually very valuable, because in that night of drinking, I suddenly saw the truth about myself. Right up until that moment, I think I've already mentioned, I really do believe that the world had wronged me. You know, that the problem was them, they and those out there. They were all out to get me. But in that night and in that one drink, and that one drink led to an act of violence. And in that moment, I could suddenly see that it's not the world, that there was something terribly wrong with me. So I am supremely grateful for falling off the wagon that night, because it finally showed me where the real problem was, and that was with me.
Thank you so much for sharing your story.
You're most welcome. Thank you for having me.
Beautiful, Karina, beautiful. Dennis, back here, I'll just give a list of some of the meetings that are in the local area. Monday night is Gala meeting. It starts at 8 o'clock. Tuesday is Elizabeth East. Starts at 8. Wednesday is Elizabeth East. It starts at 8. Thursday is Two Wells. Starts at 8 o'clock. Friday is Salisbury, starts at 8 o'clock. Saturday is Davern Park at 12 o'clock. Sunday is Salisbury, that starts at 7 o'clock. For more details of your meetings, your local meetings and meetings in South Australia, please call 1300 222222. Once again, if anyone you know is struggling with alcohol issues, please call Alcoholics Anonymous on 1300 222222, or check our website. The website is aa.org.au. Thanks very much. I might just run through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over the care of God as we understood Him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly did it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry it out. And 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all of our affairs.